They learned to their dismay, this crew, these guys. I want you to look at this. There's the airplane, good picking. Here are the officers I was telling you about, handsome as they could be. In the back row is a rather handsome gentleman in the middle named Lee Frakes. That's that gentle, nice fellow sitting right there, was right there under the propeller of good picking, and he was doing his duty. And he was, like anybody else, he was frightened. I asked him about the movie, Memphis Belle, and he just kind of shook his head. He said, the equipment was authentic, the B-17s in the movie were authentic, and the inside was authentic. But it was so hokey. He said all these guys were talking small talk to each other and teasing each other and acting like idiots. He said, I'll tell you what, and I speak for every flight mission that went out, all of them. They were all business, and they were serious and just wanting to maybe get back. That's what they wanted. The sad truth of it is 3/4 of the crews seeking 25 missions, 3/4 of them got it, 25% never got the 25th. The 8th Air Force lost more men, hard to believe but true, than the Navy and the Marines combined. What was the purpose of all this? Back at the Pentagon, they were worried about this, or whether the Pentagon was there or not, I wouldn't say, don't make a mistake here. But back where things are decided by guys who are supposed to know what they're doing, they got concerned about all these losses. But they got the best input they could get and decided we've got to get those plants that make this equipment, we've got to render them impotent, and we just have to do it with daylight bombing when we can see what we're doing. So they kept on going. They kept on going, folks, with adventures that you can't even imagine. Airplanes coming at them from every direction, fighter planes. See, the P-47s would go so far, then they couldn't go any farther. And even the P-51s, which I'll tell you about later, could not fly where there was flak. But then neither could the Luftwaffe fighters. But on the 18th flight, 18 now, for 17 flights, good picking, the reliable, great B-17 that he was a crew member of, brought him back. Sometimes, see that one there? Now that's a crew leaving the Quonset huts for the B-17. That's not a movie still, folks. That's the real thing. That's an actual picture of an 8th Air Force crew. And they got on jeeps and things and flew out to the B-17, and they got on it, and then they awaited their clearance and their word to go, and they go. And then they get in formation as quickly as they could, because formation was the safest thing to be, if there was any safety anywhere. Well, good picking on the 18th flight. It's just like you see here, contrails behind it, the whole business. B-17 formation over Schweinfurt, Germany, August 17, 1943. That's after good picking's 18th flight. But it's the same thing. All this was going on before and went on after as World War II kept on going. Well, good picking dropped its bombs. Felt very good about things. They made their run, the fighters that were assaulting them weren't any more or less than they'd been before. The flak wasn't any greater or any less than it was before. And they dropped their bombs and they made their turn and they're headed back for the English Channel. And happiness prevails. Oh, why wouldn't it? Getting another one under your belt, 7 to go. They were not more than less than 15 minutes from the channel, English Channel, on their way in. The flak's still going because they were still over enemy territory. ME-109 still busy trying to take them down and having amazing success at doing it. An ME-109 came right out of the sun, right to the front of the airplane. I don't know what kind of ammunition he had, but whatever it was very effective. He shot into the front of this airplane with everything that ME-109 had and dove out of the way. And about that time, a flak went off in worst scene scenario place. And good picking, that reliable, wonderful B-17 of all those years, all those flights, I should say, those missions. Good picking that they could rely on and feel safe in. Good picking was on its way to oblivion in a thundering crash in Belgium. That explosion and that disaster in the front of the airplane killed half the crew. The pilot, the co-pilot, the bombardier, the navigator, and one staff sergeant were instantly killed. Lee was terribly wounded with flak that came right on through and got him in the back. And he ignored it because he was trying to get the tail gunner out. Anyhow, they finally got organized. They put on their Irving parachutes that were made in Lexington at the time. They didn't put them on until they needed them. That surprised me. It probably surprises you. They did all their work on that airplane in the mission while the mission was on, no parachute on. But they always figured they had time, and in this case they did. So 5 of them jumped out of that airplane as it was going down. I can't even imagine that. Can you imagine doing that at 18 years old? 17 flights under his belt, the 18th one, he's in and doing, and down goes his airplane, and 18-year-old Lee Frakes has to get out of it, and he's wounded. He jumped, and the others did, and all 5 of them had a parachute that opened. Look at this, that's what flak will do. Tell me about flak, that's why they were afraid of it. Lee said at one time when I was interviewing, it was so thick it looked like you could walk on it. Well, anyhow, the guys jumped out, all 5 parachutes open. Only 3 lived to hit the ground because the German fighter pilots riddled the parachutes of 2 of them. They just dropped. When they hit the ground in Belgium, not far from the French border. Lee's plane was shot down on the 18th mission over Belgium, just 10 miles from the English Channel. Lee was wounded from the flak that penetrated the plane. He and 4 other crewmen managed to parachute out of the plane. Only 3 made it safely to the ground. That last line, he managed to find a hay shack to hide in. The first thing he did, you go according to the handbook that all these guys have, and when 3 hit the ground or 5 or whatever, they're told to separate immediately. Chances of survival are better if you separate. So they separated. And Lee went to a little thicket of woods. Now mind you, it's February in Belgium too. It's cold and he's wounded and bleeding. He stays in that woods and he all huddles up and he's aware that he's losing blood and feeling weaker all the time. Got to do something about this. So he uses what strength he has and he sees this big haystack and he thinks if I just can burrow in that a little bit, maybe that'll help. 18 years old, he's facing that crisis. The darn thing wasn't a haystack. It was a hay shack. It looked just like a haystack, but it had an opening, and inside you were in it. Well, there he was. He got in it. He was awfully glad to get in. At least he was protected from the elements a little bit. But he also to praise his wounds and to, oh God, I got to do something. This isn't going to work. I'm going to die. He went to the door and kind of looked out, and a French farmer saw him. He thought, oh God, is this good or bad? Pretty soon after that, the French farmer and his son came. There's the hay shack. That's a picture of it. See this opening? That says like the one that Lee took shelter in. Was that, Lee, was that the one or a picture of one like it?
One like it.
One like it, okay. They appeared at the door. And Lee had been told exactly what to say, no matter who shows up or what, or how evil or peaceful they look. So Lee, with all the strength he had, said, I am an American. The French farmer, his son sized him up and decided he was what he said he was. And they immediately took him very carefully, handling him with care that you would wish to be handled, that hurt that badly. Took him to this French farmhouse. Now mind you, that took some courage to say the least, because if the Germans detected that they were part of the underground or protected anybody, they'd kill everybody and burn down the house. But they took him in. After being discovered, a local French-speaking farmer, he was taken to the farmhouse there. He was fed, clothed with old clothes, and his wounds were treated. Now I'm going to stop at that second one because that's a story all by itself. They cleaned him up as if he were one of the family. And the farm wife, who had the savvy of real farm folks, Bruce knows what I mean when I say that. There's a difference between the old style farm wife. They didn't have anything luxurious at all. Sometimes the meals were only baked bread and milk because they had a cow. But she got him on a table-like thing and examined him carefully. And he didn't care what she did. It had to be an improvement. So he watched. And she brought several little cans, short cans, like maybe, a Vienna sausage would come in. And there was a solution in them. And they had candles in each one of them. And Lee didn't care what kind of voodoo was going on. It was better than what he had. Turned out, folks, that homespun woman, that farm wife in France, knew what she was doing, and she applied it to each one. They were all embedded. He had flak inside his back. And Lee was surprised. I don't think the farm wife or the husband were. It drew it out as if by magic. Dr. Huey's sitting here, a greatest generation veteran, if ever there was one. A man that's from Walton, two of the greatest citizens Walton ever had, period. Too modest to admit it, but it's true, J.M. Anyhow, then, to fight infection, they sent one of the kids to the creek, and after a little while he found enough leeches to put leeches in it to fight the infection. Lee wasn't even queasy about it. He didn't care what they did at this point. Amazingly, it worked. Amazingly. He had no infection. His strength began to return. The French underground, the wounds were healed, and Lee and the farmer traveled about 130 miles to Paris, where he was taken to Notre Dame Cathedral. I wasn't going to tell you that. But it's on this thing. Imagine, if you would, if you could conjure up a place least likely to be the headquarters of the American OSS, Office of Strategic Services. Think, if you would, please, of a place least likely to be the headquarters, the nerve center of the French underground. Folks, it was hard for me to believe it. That place, from the beginning of the war to the end, was the lower level of the legendary, world-famous Notre Dame Cathedral. How about them apples, folks? So I know this circuitous route we were talking about, there's Notre Dame. The circuitous route was at night because you don't want to get caught. It was skirting little towns. It was 130 miles. That took a long time. But by this time, Lee had his strength, and the French farmer could walk forever. Typical farmer and on the ball. But I'm sure Lee thought, whoa, this is it. So they went down that basement, and the OSS the basement of that very building, which Libby and I were in Paris sometimes, spent a good bit of time there. Can't believe that's what it was, but isn't it something? In the basement, they gave him a new identity entirely. New passport, all of it fake, of course. The passport's beautiful, looks real. Here, look at this. Even the stamp on it is fragmented instead of being perfect. See that? The picture's not Lee, but it looks enough like him that if a cop or a policeman or a law enforcement person just scanned it, it'd be okay. His French name was Jacques. How do you say that last name, Lee? Bordeaux?
P-E-R-N-O-T.
Whatever, you heard him. Forward and say that again, Lee. Say it in the microphone.
B-E-R-N-O-T.
How did it sound? What did you...
Bernard.
Okay. I saw his lips move. I know he was talking.
That is my actual picture. He said, that's my actual picture.
Is that your picture?
They took it.
They were able to do that?
Yeah, they took it.
Well, what a handsome young man. What a rep that guy. Anyhow, fellas, no kidding. Took his dog tags, of course, and all that stuff, and created a French guy with the French guy's clothes and the French guy's demeanor. They told him how to act and everything else. While he was in the basement of Notre Dame, he was partnered up with a Canadian RAF pilot who also was seeking to get out of there and get back home. The airplane went down on February the 8th, 1943, and there they were. They had to make a decision. Do I go to Switzerland? Very perilous. But the Swiss would, yes, they'd give you sanctuary, but they would never let you go. You'd have to wait till the war was over. He knew that if he could get to Gibraltar, an Air Force little cargo plane, what was it, C-46?
No, it was a 4-6, B-46.
Whatever. Anyhow, don't you love that word, you young folks? You use it all the time. He knew that if he could get there, if he survived to get there, which was really iffy, at least he could be picked up because that was how it worked. He knew that's how it worked. He was told and had confidence that if he ever got to Gibraltar, of course that was hundreds and, well really some 2,000 miles away, and walking, and afraid constantly of being caught. So he and the RAF pilot, who was dressed like he was, same setup, started out, always at night. I asked Lee how he traveled. He said, well, he said, I can't even begin to calculate how many bicycles we stole. Whenever we saw a bicycle, or two, or whatever, we were on it, and we rode it until it was wasted. He said, all this was at night, and it's not so easy to ride anything, a bicycle at night, but we did. We would break in shops for supplies. We'd surreptitiously go into a town, being very careful, looking left and right. And as carefully and quietly as we could, we'd break into a shop and get what we needed to get the heck out of there. And they ate anything they could keep down. And they slept wherever they could. And they made their way from Paris to a place called Boone. Did I say it right?
P-A-U.
I'll get one of these right every while. I don't know French, folks. Anyway, you can see that. Now that line's kind of like they would draw Verona Road with no curves, but in actual fact, they were all over the place. As you can imagine, at night, making their way down there. They loved to catch rides on freight trains. They just had to have a sense of where the freight train was going. And freight trains in those days had to stop and get water because they were all steam engines. So they could get on and they could get off and they could take stock of where they were, and they had a compass. Both of them were furnished with compasses, which was the most important thing you could have. Well, they made their way down there with great peril through enemy territory with German troops all over the place, but they'd see them and they'd just stop and huddle down in the darkness and wait for an opportunity, a sense of opportunity. Lee Frakes got to where he wanted to go by a sixth sense and wits that he didn't even know he had. It was one of those things where at 18 years old, with that kind of pressure, he was a survivor, and so was that RAF pilot. These were quality guys that performed with the greatest quality. So they get there. At Poe, I got it. They met a messenger who took them over the Pyrenees Mountains to Spain. Now, if any of you have ever seen the Pyrenees Mountains, that's not the best route anybody would want to take anyway. They're big, they're mountains, they're for real. We're not talking Smokies, we're talking real mountains. But anyhow, he took them over those mountains, and once they were past German security,